This is a true story with the characters' names changed. Sarah believed she had the perfect marriage, until one late-night call changed everything. Secrets and betrayals unraveled before her, forcing her to confront a painful reality. What was her husband hiding, and how did she find the strength to face it? Join us as we uncover the shocking story behind this perfect marriage. My name is Sarah Miller, and I live in the southern suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. This has been home ever since I got married, a cozy house in a quiet neighborhood where families gather, and neighbors wave to each other every morning. Our house has a spacious yard with big oak trees and a small garden where I grow different types of roses. My husband, Tom, is 38 and works as a software engineer at a major tech company in downtown Charlotte. His job keeps him busy, with frequent late nights and business trips, but he's always said he does it all for our family's future. And I used to believe that, wholeheartedly. We've been married for over 10 years and built a life I was proud of. Our 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, go to a nearby school, and most weekdays, we're caught up in the usual routine. I drop the kids off at school, then head to a local cafe to work remotely and catch up with friends. Weekends are strictly for family time. Tom is a huge Panthers fan and has passed that love of football on to the kids, so whenever the Panthers have a game at the Bank of America Stadium, we're there cheering together. Tom and I have a close group of friends, mostly people he's known since college and others I met through community events. Our life might seem ordinary, but I found it comforting. Saturday nights are often spent barbecuing in our backyard, with everyone sharing stories. I remember one evening when our oldest, Jake, told us he had named his stuffed dog Pizza and ended up getting teased about it for a whole week at school. We couldn't stop laughing at his story. It was those little moments that made life feel complete. Both of our families live nearby. My mom is only about an hour away, and we often take the kids to visit her. Tom's mom, too, drops by occasionally to help out with the kids whenever we have hectic schedules. During holidays like Thanksgiving, our house fills up with friends and family, each bringing dishes they've made. It's one of those gatherings where everyone feels connected, almost like an extended family, and I used to think our peaceful life would always stay that way. Tom has always been the kind of man I trusted and loved deeply. I was so proud of him. He's hardworking, he loves his family, and he has this easygoing, optimistic nature. He's the type who always knows how to make the kids and me laugh, and I believed we had found a happiness that wasn't easily shaken. But sometimes, just when life feels perfect, it throws you a curveball. And in a single night, everything you thought was solid can come crashing down. Around 2 in the morning, my phone jolted me awake. I rarely ever called at that hour, friends and family know I'm a light sleeper. At first, I thought it must be a wrong number, but when I picked it up, a calm voice on the other end said it was a police officer from a nearby station. He informed me that my husband, Tom, had been arrested. Arrested? I was so stunned I could barely process the words. He went on to explain that Tom had been taken in for disturbing the peace after a loud argument with a woman in a residential neighborhood. I was at a loss for words. This was completely unlike Tom. I honestly thought they had the wrong person. After all, he'd told me he was working the night shift. The officer's voice was steady, but inside my thoughts were racing. I had to wake up the kids, hastily pulling jackets over their pajamas and trying to reassure them that everything was fine. I tried to sound calm as I told them we just needed to go pick up their dad. They were so groggy they barely asked questions, which I was grateful for. The drive to the police station felt like it would never end, and my mind was spinning with questions. Why would Tom lie about being at work? Who was this woman? And how could things have escalated so badly that the police had to get involved? When we finally arrived, I spotted Tom sitting in the waiting area, his head in his hands. He looked tired, frustrated, maybe even ashamed. I couldn't shake the sick feeling in my stomach. When the officer brought him over, Tom barely looked at me. All he muttered was, "Let's go home, Sarah. I don't want to talk about it here." That was it. No explanation, no reassurance, just a quick look that told me not to press for answers. On the way home, Tom insisted on driving, leaving me in the back seat with the kids. I did my best to comfort them, distracting them with a story about how their dad and I had once gotten lost on our way to the beach. I told them about how we'd taken one wrong turn and ended up wandering through the countryside, passing farms and fields. The kids laughed when I told them how we sang silly songs the whole way and finally found a little diner where we ate pancakes for dinner. It was one of those funny, unplanned memories, but tonight, I couldn't lift their spirits. They were just as tired and confused as I was. Sitting in the back seat, I watched Tom's face in the rearview mirror, noticing the constant glow of his phone as he received message after message. Each time, he angled the screen away from me, his fingers moving quickly over the keys, almost like he was hiding something. This was a side of Tom I had never seen before. My heart pounded as I wondered if I'd ever really known him at all. By the time we pulled into the driveway, I felt a tangle of emotions, anger, fear, and heartbreak. This wasn't the Tom I thought I knew, the man who never missed Friday pizza nights with the kids, who volunteered at school events just to spend more time with them, who always surprised me with roses on our anniversary. He barely spoke as we got out of the car, and the silence was so heavy. After I settled the kids back in bed, I took a deep breath, steeling myself to demand some answers, but part of me was terrified of what I might hear. When we got home, I tried to stay calm as I brought the kids upstairs, gently settling them back into bed. They were completely worn out after the chaotic night, still too sleepy to really understand what was going on. Once I closed their door, I went back downstairs, feeling a heavy weight of questions and frustration. Tom was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands, avoiding my gaze. I sat down across from him, keeping my voice as steady as I could, and asked him what really happened tonight. At first, he just sat there, silent, like he was choosing his words carefully. Finally, he began with a hesitant, shaky story about giving a coworker a ride home and somehow ending up in an argument with some other woman. He claimed it was just a misunderstanding, that she'd thought he was lying to cover something up. But as he spoke, every detail felt disjointed, as if he was making it up on the spot. Nothing fit together, and my heart started pounding as I realized he was still hiding something. I sat there, listening quietly, but I didn't believe a word he was saying. I looked straight at him, holding his gaze, and asked again, "Tom, what is going on? Please, no more lies." I could see the panic in his eyes, and for a moment, he just sat there, looking lost, almost like he was debating whether to tell the truth. Finally, he took a deep breath, almost like he was summoning the courage, and then he admitted, "Sarah. I've been seeing someone else." Hearing those words felt like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and for a moment, all I could do was sit there in stunned silence, trying to process every single word. With a resigned look, as if there was no use hiding it anymore, Tom started talking, his gaze fixed on the floor. "You told me it started a few months back, that it had begun innocently, just someone to talk to when work felt overwhelming. But somewhere along the way, it spiraled out of control, and he felt like he couldn't stop. He said he'd been feeling lost, stuck, and somehow, being with her made him feel understood." The words hurt, but the real dagger came when he admitted that tonight, she had just found out he was married, and that's why they had that big argument. "Sarah, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice trembling as he reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I know I messed up. I never meant for it to go this far. Please, just give me a chance to make this right." I just sat there, my heart shattered, feeling a wave of betrayal and disappointment. This was the man I had trusted with my whole life, the one I had given all my love and faith to, now begging for forgiveness for something I never thought he'd do. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. I sat there, staring at Tom, feeling a mix of deep pain and disappointment. The words "I'd cheated" kept replaying in my mind, cutting deeper with each passing moment. After all these years together, this was something I never imagined I would have to face. I clenched my hands, trying to steady myself, then looked him straight in the eye, determined to understand how we ended up here. "So you thought cheating was a way to deal with feeling lost?" I asked, my voice shaking but calm. "Did you ever think about me, about the kids, Tom? Did our family even cross your mind while you were with her? Tom looked down, unable to meet my eyes. He seemed like he wanted to say something, but his face was filled with guilt and regret. I saw him reach out, as if to hold my hand, but I pulled back slightly. Right now, I couldn't bear to touch him, there was too much pain and betrayal. He noticed, and it seemed to crush him. His shoulders slumped, and his voice cracked as he spoke. Sarah, I know I messed up. I have no excuse for what I did. I hurt you. I betrayed our family. But please give me a chance to make it right. I promise I'll never do this again. I'll do whatever it takes for you and the kids to forgive me. His words sounded desperate, and I could see the pain in his eyes. But inside, the hurt and the sense of betrayal were too overwhelming. His apology, his promise that he'd never do it again, felt hollow now. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to think this was just a horrible mistake, but there was this wound inside me that felt impossible to heal, a pain that wouldn't go away. I felt like I couldn't breathe, my heart weighed down with confusion and heartbreak. Looking at the man I had once loved and trusted sitting across from me, begging for forgiveness, I realized that part of me still cared for him, but the damage he'd done was too much. Tom continued to look at me, his eyes pleading, hoping for some sign of forgiveness. But deep down, I felt like something had shattered, a trust that couldn't be repaired after everything he had just confessed tonight. After that night, I felt completely lost, unsure of how to move forward. Tom's apologies and promises did little to ease my sense of betrayal. In my heart, I knew I couldn't get through this alone, so I picked up the phone and called Amy, my closest friend and a trusted lawyer. Early the next morning, I poured everything out to her, from Tom's tearful confession to his promises that he would end it all. Amy listened quietly without interrupting, letting me vent every painful detail. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said gently, "Sarah, maybe it's time to start preparing for a divorce. But before making any decisions, you need more evidence, for your sake and the kids. You can't rely on his word alone." Hearing the word divorce made my heart sink, but I knew Amy was right. She also suggested hiring a private investigator to track Tom's movements, to confirm if he was actually keeping his word or if he was still involved with this woman. "We need the whole truth before making any decisions," Amy said, her tone firm but compassionate. "If Tom is still seeing her, you deserve to know." Following Amy's advice, I arranged a meeting with Mark, the investigator she recommended. Mark was calm and professional, with years of experience in similar cases, and he listened to my story with understanding. He explained his surveillance plan, assuring me that Tom would have no idea he was being watched. Although a part of me still clung to the hope that Tom had truly changed, I knew I needed to face whatever the truth might be. Mark started his work that very week, tracking Tom's movements from the moment he left our house. For the first few days, everything seemed normal. Tom went to the office just as he said. But then, one afternoon around 5 p.m., instead of heading home after work, Tom drove to a small cafe on the north side of town. It was an out-of-the-way spot, quiet and tucked away. Mark positioned himself a few tables away and discreetly took photos as Tom sat, glancing anxiously at his phone. Not long after, a woman walked in and joined him. The photos Mark sent me were a little grainy, but her figure was unmistakable. They sat talking for a long time, and I noticed Tom would reach out to touch her hand occasionally, sharing intimate looks that made my stomach turn. Just looking at those images, I felt my heart shatter all over again, realizing that Tom's promises to cut ties had been empty words. In the days that followed, Mark continued his surveillance. One evening, when Tom told me he'd be working late, I received another message from Mark. He'd seen Tom and the woman leaving a small restaurant together in the suburbs. They walked out, got into Tom's car, and drove to a nearby park. Mark trailed them carefully, keeping his distance to avoid suspicion. They strolled along a quiet path, pausing to talk and exchanging lingering looks. With every picture Mark sent, my doubts turned into harsh reality. Tom hadn't stopped seeing her at all. Another time, Mark found them meeting at a small hotel outside of town, during business hours. That day, Tom had told me he had a client meeting. I'd believed him without question. But the photos Mark sent showed Tom and this woman walking into the hotel lobby together. At that moment, any hope I'd held on to was completely crushed. This was undeniable proof. Tom wasn't just unfaithful, he was methodically hiding it all. Over the next few weeks, Mark kept following Tom, sending me more evidence that ripped my heart apart. They met at a cozy bar on the corner of a quiet street, sitting close like a couple, even embracing each other openly. Another day, Mark caught them shopping together at a mall far from home, laughing and browsing as though they had nothing to hide. It became painfully clear that Tom's promises to end things had been lies. The evidence Mark gathered was irrefutable. Not only had Tom continued his affair, but he had taken it further, risking everything. Looking at each photo, each undeniable proof of betrayal, I knew I couldn't live in this deception any longer. It was time to face the truth and protect myself and my children from this painful betrayal. After receiving all the evidence from Mark, I felt like my entire world had collapsed. Each photo, every detail in Mark's reports, haunted me like a recurring nightmare. The images of Tom laughing, holding hands, and sharing intimate glances with another woman were like 1,000 cuts, each one deepening my pain. For days, I lived in a haze of heartache and betrayal, questioning if I'd somehow done something wrong, if all the sacrifices I'd made for this family had somehow led to this. One morning, after dropping the kids off at school, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. I knew I couldn't bear this weight alone anymore. I called Amy, my closest friend and confidant. She was at my door within the hour, and we sat in the living room as I poured out everything, every painful detail, every moment of doubt, every fear. Amy listened quietly, her face filled with compassion as she placed a reassuring hand on mine. "Sarah," she began, her voice calm yet resolute, "you can't keep living like this. Tom has lied to you over and over, and he's not even making a real effort to change. You deserve so much more than this. It's time to think about yourself and the kids, about your future." Hearing her words, I knew deep down she was right. I had given everything to hold this family together, but Tom had thrown it all away without a second thought. Amy suggested that we start preparing the divorce paperwork and make sure I had the legal protections I needed for myself and the kids. It was daunting, but I knew it was what I had to do. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. I tried to keep a brave face for the kids, to keep life as normal as possible for them, but every time I saw Tom come home, pretending as though nothing had happened, anger and hurt surged within me. One evening, during dinner, he shared a funny story about a colleague at work, making everyone laugh. I sat there, staring at him, the man I had once loved, once trusted implicitly, now just a stranger sitting across from me, feigning innocence. Little did he know that I had seen the full extent of his betrayal. Another night, Tom claimed he had a late meeting, but thanks to the tracking app Mark had set up, I knew better. Watching his location move to a small bar we had never been to, I felt a crushing weight of disappointment settle over me. I didn't say anything. I just sat there in the darkened living room, phone in hand, my heart aching. Every time he came home, bringing flowers or offering hollow apologies, I felt nothing but emptiness. Finally, one Sunday morning, I sat down with Amy at the kitchen table, the two of us surrounded by half-drunk cups of coffee and a quiet understanding of what needed to be done. Amy guided me through every step, preparing the paperwork, planning the divorce filing, and ensuring that my assets and custody rights would be protected. Her words gave me strength. She reminded me that this wasn't just for me but for my children, to give them a stable future free from deceit and turmoil. Amy took my hand, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Sarah, you deserve a better life, one without betrayal and lies. Remember that you have the strength to move forward, and I'll be here with you every step of the way." Her encouragement felt like a lifeline. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I also realized that I had no other choice. With a renewed sense of resolve, I began to take those first steps toward independence, preparing to build a life where my children and I could feel safe and loved. The marriage I had once believed in was over, but I was ready to create a new chapter, one where the pain of betrayal no longer held us back. The weeks following the decision to prepare for divorce were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. During the day, I kept up appearances to protect the kids from noticing any changes. I still got up early to make breakfast, still chatted with them about school, and still laughed at their stories. But inside, I felt hollow, as if every part of me was wounded and raw. Each night when Tom came home, I was swept up in a storm of conflicting emotions, pain, anger, and a sense of hopelessness that wouldn't let go. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat alone in the living room, gazing at the family photos on the wall. Every picture captured a moment of joy, memories of vacations, holidays, the kids' birthdays. All of them felt like cruel reminders of the life I thought we had, of the man I thought Tom was. One night, Tom suddenly suggested a family outing, saying that we needed time together to reconnect. He spoke about rebuilding our relationship, as if a few outings could undo the damage he had caused. I nodded politely, but inside, I knew nothing he did now would change anything. I was done believing in his promises, his attempts at repentance. That night, I lay awake in bed, my back turned to Tom, listening to his breathing, feeling a coldness that went beyond physical distance. In my mind, I replayed every image Mark had shown me, every secret meeting, every touch, every smile he shared with her. They were etched in my memory, vivid and relentless, reminding me that the man lying beside me was a stranger now, someone I couldn't trust. One morning, while I was making breakfast for the kids, Tom walked into the kitchen and stood silently at the doorway, watching me. His eyes were filled with sadness and regret, as though he wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. I felt his gaze but didn't turn around, continuing to prepare breakfast as if he weren't there. He eventually sighed and walked away, sensing the unbridgeable distance between us. I knew he felt the weight of the distance between us, but I no longer cared to hear his apologies. The marriage we had was gone, I was staying only for the children, but my heart had long since left. Gradually, I started to find strength within myself. Every day, I spent time with Amy, working through the details of the divorce. She helped me organize my finances, ensuring that my rights and the kids' future would be protected. We met with a child psychologist who could help the kids navigate the upcoming changes. Step by step, I was preparing for a life without Tom, a life where I could finally feel whole again. One afternoon, while organizing my closet, I found a small box filled with letters Tom had written to me when we were first dating. Each letter was filled with promises of loyalty, words about how he'd never hurt me, declarations that he would always be there for me. Holding those letters, I felt a pang of nostalgia, but it wasn't painful in the same way as before. I finally understood that the love we'd once shared was long gone, erased by his betrayal and deceit. Those words, once so meaningful, were now just remnants of a past I couldn't return to. I placed the letters back in the box, tucking away the memories of a love that was now just a shadow. I knew that I was ready to move forward, to create a new life where I could live freely and with dignity, unburdened by lies and betrayal. The next morning, as I watched Tom leave for work, I felt a quiet sense of resolve. I knew that my decision was the right one, and I wasn't going to look back. The road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to face whatever came next, determined to protect myself and my children from any further pain. After officially filing for divorce, my life shifted into a challenging yet liberating chapter. When Tom received the court notice, he seemed shocked. He tried reaching out constantly, text messages, endless calls. At first, I responded briefly, trying to keep things civil, but each conversation left me feeling more drained. His apologies, his last-minute promises, felt hollow, as if they were coming from a stranger rather than the man I once trusted. Every night, after putting the kids to bed, I would sit alone in the quiet living room, contemplating the future for myself and my children. I knew that building a new life wouldn't be easy, but there was no turning back. My heart still ached, weighed down by the memories, yet I understood that I had to face them to truly move forward. A few days later, Tom came over, asking to talk. He said he understood his mistakes and wanted a chance to repair things, to keep the family together for the kids' sake. I saw genuine regret in his eyes, and for a brief moment, I felt his pain too. But I also knew that too much had been broken. There was no way to rebuild trust that had been shattered, no way to erase the deep wounds he had inflicted. "Tom, I gave everything I had to this marriage," I said, my voice trembling but steady. I once believed this family was our safe haven. But now I understand that I need a different kind of haven, one without betrayal, without empty promises. Tom fell silent, his eyes welling with tears, as though he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. He bowed his head, and in that moment, I knew he understood that it was over. We sat there in silence, two people who had once loved each other, but were now divided by an unbridgeable distance. In the weeks that followed, I focused on stabilizing life for myself and the kids. Every day, I tried to keep things as normal as possible, so they wouldn't feel the impact of the changes too heavily. I took them to school, cooked meals, played with them, and kept up with our familiar routines. In those moments, I found a sense of peace and purpose that had been missing for too long. One Sunday, the kids and I decided to bake cookies together, an activity we'd always enjoyed. We mixed the dough, rolled it out, cut shapes, and laughed as we watched our odd little cookies come out of the oven. Seeing them smile and hearing their laughter brought warmth back to my heart. I realized then that I could still create happiness for myself and my children, even without Tom by my side. In those quiet, joyful moments, I felt ready to embrace this new life. I was no longer the fragile woman who once depended on her husband for everything. I had grown stronger, more resilient, and I was ready to be the solid foundation my children needed. My love, trust, and hope were now reserved for the ones who truly mattered, my kids and myself. Looking back on the journey, I no longer felt the intense pain I once did. The beautiful memories from the past were just that, a part of a story I'd read and closed. I knew now that ahead of me was a new path, one of freedom, self-respect, and a love I was finally ready to give to myself and my children. The months following the finalization of the divorce were both challenging and transformative. At first, the quietness of the house felt overwhelming, especially on mornings after I'd dropped the kids off at school or on evenings when I found myself alone in the living room. But gradually, I began to realize that this emptiness was exactly what I needed, space to rediscover myself and feel a sense of peace I had forgotten. I poured my focus into the kids and into nurturing myself. Instead of waiting for Tom to come home for dinner, I started creating special moments, just for me and the kids. On weekends, we'd plan small celebrations at home, making our favorite dishes, decorating the dining table with flowers from the garden, and sharing laughter over stories from our day. Watching the kids' happy faces, seeing their joy and knowing I had made the right choice, reassured me. This new life was exactly what our little family needed. One day, I decided to join an art class I had once dreamed of but never pursued, always too busy with the demands of being a wife and mother. The class became a space for me to release my anxieties and focus on my own emotions. I met new friends, each of whom had their own story of struggle and resilience. Hearing their experiences gave me strength, a reminder that I wasn't alone on this journey. One afternoon, while walking in the park with the kids, we met an older woman sitting alone on a bench. Her eyes held a quiet sadness, but she smiled warmly when the kids approached her. We sat beside her, and as we talked, she shared that she too had experienced loss but had found solace in caring for her grandchildren and embracing life with patience. Her words resonated with me, reminding me that happiness was still possible if I allowed myself to embrace it fully. Step by step, I learned to manage everything around the house on my own, from small repairs to budgeting and looking after the kids' needs. There were days I'd wake up early to prepare breakfast, drop the kids at school, and then head to a yoga class or meet with new friends. Each day, I felt myself growing stronger, more confident, no longer reliant on anyone else for my sense of security and happiness. Looking back, I realized I was no longer the fragile, dependent woman I'd been. I had become a resilient mother, ready to face any challenge to bring joy and stability to my children's lives. The painful experiences from my marriage were no longer haunting shadows, but valuable lessons that had shaped me. I had learned to let go of what wasn't mine anymore, to hold on to the things that truly mattered. One night, after the kids had fallen asleep, I sat by the window, looking out over the city lights. A deep sense of peace washed over me. It had been so long since I felt this way, free, confident, and ready for a new chapter. I knew that there would still be challenges ahead, but I also knew I was strong enough to face them. Most importantly, I had finally found myself again, a woman full of confidence, strength, and love. This love, now, I poured into myself and my children, into the new life we were creating day by day, a life no longer weighed down by betrayal and lies but filled instead with simple joys and peace. In the months following the divorce, Tom's life began to unravel in ways he hadn't anticipated. At first, he tried to project an image of freedom, as if leaving the family was something he wanted. I heard from mutual friends that he was frequently going out, attending parties, staying out late with new acquaintances, and meeting other women. But I knew him well enough to sense that all of these late nights and distractions were merely a way to hide the emptiness he was feeling. Over time, those social gatherings and endless nights out stopped providing him with any satisfaction. Tom started to feel increasingly lost and alone. Coming home to an empty apartment, with no laughter from the kids or the comfort of family life, made him realize the depth of what he'd lost. The things he once took for granted were now the things he missed the most. He began reaching out to me more often, ostensibly to ask about the kids, but each conversation revealed his growing sense of regret. One afternoon, while I was at the park with the kids, I received a message from Tom. He said he needed to talk, that he wanted to share something with me. We agreed to meet at a familiar cafe, one we used to visit often when we were first dating, filled with memories of simpler, happier times. When I arrived, Tom was already seated, looking worn out and visibly remorseful. As he looked up at me, I saw a man burdened by his own mistakes, weighed down by regret. "I know I messed up," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "I thought I'd find happiness somewhere else, but it turns out everything I ever needed was right here." He paused, gazing down at his coffee with an expression of deep sadness. I traded everything that mattered for a fleeting sense of freedom, and I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. Hearing his words, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I no longer felt the intense pain or anger that used to come up at the thought of him. Instead, I felt a quiet understanding. I realized that he was now facing the consequences of his choices, and that life without his family was forcing him to confront his mistakes. Tom went on to talk about the lonely nights in his empty apartment, how he missed the little moments we shared as a family, the dinners, the laughter, the simple weekend outings with the kids. "I went searching for freedom, but in the end, I just found loneliness," he confessed, his voice tinged with regret. "I was so caught up chasing something new that I forgot how precious what I already had was." Since that conversation, I noticed a change in Tom. He became more reserved, less interested in the nightlife and social events that had initially filled his time. Instead, he focused on reconnecting with the kids, visiting them regularly on weekends, and making an effort to stay involved. I could sense his genuine desire to make up for lost time, but I also knew that the damage he'd done could never be fully undone. Our children slowly came to terms with the fact that their parents would never be together again. They cherished the time they spent with their father, but they were also growing accustomed to life with just me. I could see the regret in Tom's eyes each time he came to pick them up and then had to leave, but both of us understood that our marriage was now a closed chapter. Tom had become part of my past, a story I had moved beyond. At a gathering with friends, I overheard someone mention that Tom had opened up about his regrets, admitting that he had never expected freedom to feel so empty. He once thought that leaving the family would bring him happiness, but he had been wrong. The simple things, the family dinners, the closeness of being around his kids, were now the things he longed for but couldn't reclaim. Reflecting on it all, I realized that both Tom and I had learned valuable lessons from our broken marriage. I had discovered my own strength and independence, no longer needing to rely on anyone else to feel whole. And Tom, he had learned that freedom means little without true connections and genuine love. We each walked our own path now, with our own separate regrets, but we both knew that this decision had been necessary for us to grow and find ourselves again.